All right, so thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here today. And so sorry for this slight delay. We're just troubleshooting a technical issue, and one of our guest speakers today was just having some trouble logging on. So hopefully she'll be with us very shortly. But in the meantime, we'll get started. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us here today. My name's Jazz Keeler, and I am the Virtual Projects Coordinator with Griffin Art Projects. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging that Griffin Art Projects is situated on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Stolo nations. And we are honored and grateful to undertake our work here. We're really excited to be hosting Marlene Yuen today for an artist talk and printmaking demo. And today's program is offered in collaboration with WePress. And WePress is a community art space in the downtown Eastside of Vancouver on the unoccupied and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And it's just been so great to work with WePress for this project. And I wanted to give a big thank you to the entire WePress team and a shout out to the collective member, Luca Kara Sakafian. And I'm sorry, Luca, if I'm pronouncing your last name wrong, but Luca has been such a tremendous help in organizing and preparing for today's presentation. And as well as to say a huge thank you to Linda Hoffman, a fellow WePress collective member, who will hopefully be joining us for today's talk, and we'll be sharing a little bit about the history of WePress and the story of the Whose Chinatown Letterpress Rescue Project. So just a few housekeeping notes before we jump in. I wanted to mention that it is a webinar format today, which means that we cannot see or hear you, but we do invite you to get in touch with us using the chat dialog box below. We'll be able to respond to questions there, and there will also be time for audience questions at the end of today's presentation. And you'll notice at the bottom of your screen to the left of the chat dialog box, there's a second dialog box which is for Q&A, and we'll be checking for questions there at the end when we do our Q&A session, but you also have the option of asking your question out loud. So if that's your preference, feel free to just indicate into the Q&A that you'd like us to unmute you, and I'll go ahead and do that when the time comes. So that's about it for housekeeping. Today's event is presented in conjunction with Griffin's current exhibition, Whose Chinatown? Examining Chinatown Gazes in Art, Archives, and Collections, guest curated by Karen Tam. And a selection of Marlene Yuen's handmade books are on display at Griffin Art Projects as part of this exhibition, including Sun Hing Printers, a recent letterpress and risograph book about Canada's first Chinese English print shop, which was founded in 1908 and remained in operation for over 100 years before officially closing their doors in 2014. So just to give you kind of an overview of today's schedule for our talk today, we are going to hear from Marlene Yuen and hopefully Linda Hoffman, but perhaps we'll start with a brief presentation by Marlene Yuen, who's prepared a slideshow for us today. And as well, we'll be sharing a demo that was recorded at WePress that just gives a super up close and engaging look at the letterpress process. So we're really excited to share that with you today. And then, as I mentioned, we will open it up to audience questions. So I am very excited to introduce Marlene. And Marlene is a Vancouver-based artist who received her Bachelor's of Studio Arts in 1998 from the University of British Columbia. She has exhibited at galleries, artist-run centers, and cultural events in Canada, the United States, UK, Belgium, and Japan. Her main focus is on handmade books using printmaking processes. So her books have been retained in special collections nationally and internationally. In 2009, she completed a winter letterpress residency at Penland School of Crafts with master printer Robert Walp of Chestercreek Press. And her current subject matters deal with Chinese-Canadian labor history and preservation of Vancouver's historic Chinatown. So just a huge thank you, Marlene, for joining us here today. And I'm going to pass the mic over to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I will be talking about how I came about this idea of making this book, Sun Hing Printers. This idea kind of started quite some time ago, since the print shop closed in 2014. So what I will do is kind of go back in time and basically show you a slideshow of my letterpress printing experience and how I arrived to making this book. So let's go on with the slideshow. Pardon me, geez. Oh, share screen. Bear with me a second. Is that looking bigger? Okay. So thank you so much for joining us today. I will basically go back in time, and here we are in the Blue Ridge Mountains, where I first learned letterpress printing. And this it's at Penland School of Crafts, which is an amazing facility for artists. And their main thing is they have artist residency. And this was a winter letterpress residency. As you can see, there's a light dusting of snow. And it's their off season where they often invite printmaking students. So at the time I was wanting to learn letterpress printing. So I figured 2 weeks, I'm going to learn something. And the Blue Ridge Mountains is quite lovely, but it's also in a very small town in Tennessee. So that's me 12 years ago, actually. And that is a Vandercook press that I first learned on. I worked with in this very newly built studio, and it is amazing letterpress resource studio. It was funded, and the residency was funded by Wingate Foundation, which is, if you look back, it's actually Walmart money. Very interesting, but anyways, I'll move on. Beautiful studios, and this is Robert Walp, and he basically taught me how to set handset lead type. And that's back in 2009. And it was a great learning experience. I had no idea how to, I had an idea. I wanted to make a book about Canadian woodland animals and to have some text accompany it. So I was doing some woodcut illustrations along with it. So this was in January at the time, I think January. So as you can see, letterpress printing is very laborious. Every little letter and space is set by hand, and then eventually it gets tied up into this very tight rectangle and eventually makes its way to the press. And these were the woodcut carvings that were to accompany the text. So, and actually at that time, it was 12 years ago, which would bring us back to the year of the ox, which we are now back into the year of ox. So I thought that was a funny thing when going back in these pictures, because being in this very small town and predominantly white, I was like, oh, it's Chinese New Year. There's no one to, who's going to celebrate Chinese New Year? So my dear studio mate, Liz, who was from Boston, she cut out these little images of the ox and put them around this space around me. And she made this little bunting. It was really it warmed my heart. It was January, so it was just nice to see that there was just no way we could celebrate Chinese New Year. Anyways, but then the sun came out. It was just a really great life experience, learning this new skill and meeting new artists. And the end result was this book. So that was 2009. And my main reason for wanting to learn letterpress was because prior to that, I was making books that were very much one of a kind, unique, like one-offs that were difficult to reproduce. So I had no idea that there were interest in my books. So people would ask about buying one, and it's like, well, I can't. There's only one. So then I knew that I needed to revisit printmaking. So this is an earlier version of basically the first book I made, and it's a pop-up book. And I learned how to make pop-up books by local artist Celia King, who also teaches at Emily Carr University, where I work. This was great, but like reproducing a book and this is another book that was a one-off, but I enjoyed making books, but also making more than one book is very useful. So I would go on to my practice of letterpress printing, and this was in, I believe, 2010 in Belgium, and I did a short residency at Frans Mazero Centrum, which is just outside of Antwerp. And that I ended up doing more polymer plates and working with illustration. And so letterpress printing, imagery can appear in different ways, but then there was a big pause in my life because I became a mother, and there's a few years of not printing. So when I just returned back to work at Emily Carr University, I work as a studio technician, and there became news of a letterpress print shop closing in Chinatown. So I was going back, I was trying to be really precise about what my memory was about this, just because, I was still quite tired mom. And then went back through my emails, and I noticed that Kathy Shimizu had sent out a big email about Sun Hing Printers closing out, and her plan to rescue the type, and primarily the Chinese type. So that I just looked back, and that email is still in my email box. And then it's like, at the same time, the word got around, and Emily Carr University was interested in purchasing some equipment for their letterpress print shop too, where I would occasionally support in the letterpress printing area. So we also are looking right now at a photograph of the print shop, and it's taken by Morris Lum. And this photograph is actually in the Whose Chinatown exhibit right now. It's as you can see, the color of this building is very unique. So, but actually this photo appears to be taken when the shop was closed. Anyways, these are just a few pictures of my initial visit to Sun Hing Printers when they first closed. And they were selling all sorts of like letterpress printing blocks. And so they're quite intriguing. Like a lot of people were buying these little pieces, and then they're very beautiful pieces. And like I think, I wasn't sure what people's intention of buying these little blocks, but I myself bought about 6 blocks. And there was a little display that was at the shop, and you can tell it's the family historical blocks of the business. And so there was some takeaway proofs. So they're quite interesting images. And this is the one sheet that I took away because they were printed, and Hilda, who is the matriarch of the family, she said, just take one. And I said, okay. So I took this away with me, and then had it in my studio for a while. And it's like, I really like this. I don't know. I really want to do something about it. It's just, as a letterpress printer, I feel very strongly that, it's something I'm quite passionate about. This, and so it's a quite, if you go inside a building, it's quite vast. It's quite, there's 2 floors, and just going in, you see all these presses, and it's quite like amazing. It's like you're in a little bit of a time warp. And the family had invested quite a lot of money into various presses, Heidelberg, Vandercook. They did a lot of printing on the CMP platen press, which is the one that usually is like a clamshell. So, and there are quite notice. What you'll notice is it's just stuff everywhere. But I was just super intrigued by all these items in the shop. And they were also the first Chinese English print shop in Canada. So I couldn't, it's quite amazing. I was just looking at every little thing in the shop, and it just felt like a little museum. And it was kind of sad to see that they were closing down, but the Chinese type was very special. Like, what I found out later on was that the family made trips to Hong Kong to purchase the Chinese type just to keep up with the style of type. So as you can see, there's a little example of this here. And recently, a Hong Kong-based artist sent me this little booklet about Hong Kong style letterpress typefaces. So I thought I'd just include this here today too. It's quite beautiful. But to be perfectly honest, I did not start really doing much about this book. I had bought these few blocks. I have that little sheet from Hilda, and then in about 2019, I believe, I had a small grant from BC Arts Council, and I proposed to make this book. But then I was like, where do I was like, I don't know. So they told me, oh, you got the funding to make the book. And I said, okay. And then I was like, oh, geez. Like, so I basically had to go back and think about how I was going to do this, because quite some time had passed from when the shop had closed in 2014. And then it was about 2018, 2019 that I would start working on this book. So I approached the librarian at my work, Suzanne Rackover, and said, I want to make this book. How do I start? So Suzanne has a lot of expertise in copyright, and she suggested the first thing I do is get in touch with the family, the Lam family who ran the print shop, because they're still very much alive, and I should let them know that I'm going to work on this project. So that was kind of hard. So I was trying to like get in touch with the Lam families, like, but how? So then I noticed that Alyssa Side de Jesus of formerly of the Rhodey House Museum had a exhibit about the Lam family a while ago too. So I got in touch with Alyssa, and then she provided me Bowman Lam's contact info, and I contacted Bowman, and then I asked Bowman, can I make this book? I want to honor your family's history and business in Chinatown. And he goes, yes, it's been a long time, but sure. And then so he seemed very supportive, but he confessed that he was not a printer. So that I get in touch with Norman, his brother, Norman Lam. So then I did, and he approved as well. So basically getting people's permission and making sure that I was being as accurate as possible. So talking to Norman, he gave a very brief interview over the phone, which was great. Pardon me. And I asked about what memories he had of Chinatown, and he brought up to me this, because do you know about the Fred Herzog photo? So I'm gonna pause for a minute and say that this photo is actually in the exhibit now at Griffin Art Projects too. And then I said, oh yes, I know about that photo. So, well, that photo is one of the daily chores was for us to wash the steps to the print shop. And after we wash the steps, we're able to play. So he says that the boy that is waiting right there, as you can see, looking down, he's waiting for us to finish washing his steps so we can play. So he said that was a very early childhood memory. And then I really wanted to include this image into the book. So I got in touch with Equinox Gallery, and at the time, Fred Herzog wasn't doing very well. He was quite sick. And Equinox I was just explaining my project about this book, and they're like, well, Fred prefers that when his images are reproduced, that they're reproduced in full color. But a lot of my book isn't in full color. So, but because they knew that my book was going to be low impact, meaning that not many people were going to see this book, they gave a verbal yes. So thankfully, this image is in the book, and let's see. Just the one sheet. You may see a lot of rubber stamp imagery because the shop actually first started out as a rubber stamp shop. And from this one sheet, I also was like, these images are quite interesting. So I asked Norman if I was able to use these images in the book, and he said yes as well. So this is my very humble collection of letterpress blocks, and these are the few that I bought. So, you know, I was like, no, I want to make a book. There's not many blocks. How do I move on? So I knew that I had to like branch out, and I knew I had to get in touch with WePress, because WePress had successfully purchased a bit of the Chinese printed letterpress blocks, and also they purchased a bit of the Chinese type. So they also were able to set up a small studio in the Sunhua Center. This is before Sunhua Center is what it is right now. So this is their early open house, and I attended, and it was great. It was a great community open house, because they also ended up with the sign press from the Woodwards. So a lot of the wood blocks that you see here are from the Woodwards that closed down. Okay, I just said that. So this is some imagery from the open house. This is about 2016, so this is a few years back. So I reached out to Kathy again about, this is 2019, said, I want to make this book. I want to include some of the Chinese blocks, and Kathy was very supportive, and I said, yes, you may, but you cannot print anything unless you can understand it. And it's like, you know, so I'll be very honest, I am Chinese, but I have never really learned to read. I actually cannot even read Chinese and characters. So, but Kathy said, as part of WePress programming, they have open studios where Yarrow has volunteers that help with translation. So I got in touch with Jody Mock, and she's a former board member of Yarrow, and they provide a lot of support for seniors in the Chinese seniors in the downtown Eastside, where, let's say, if they were going to an appointment and they needed help with translation, then Yarrow helps with that. So I managed to hire Jody to do the translation of some of the blocks. For example, this is a block that I end up using, and it is Chinese alcohol from a distillery. And so this block looks very big here, but it's very small. And Jody was still able to translate these characters. And so this is when I print it, it looks that way. So this is water chestnuts and this in English. So just, working with WePress has been amazing. This book really could not have happened without accessing the letterpress blocks. And but just going through the things that WePress has this is a menu that Sun Hing Printers printed, and it is, if you can even pick it up, it's quite amazing. It's perfectly printed. It's hard to imagine that a menu, a thing that people would pick up and touch, like that. This is so carefully printed, and it's just amazing. So this is the Corex press that WePress recently acquired, and this is the one that we use in the demo today. So the pieces were starting to fall together. I have some Chinese blocks, and I have some interview, like I transcribed some of the interview that I've done with Norman. And then I was like, okay, well, I guess I better start making this book. And then I was like, so like, I don't really know too much except the knowledge that I've had. So I start to compose 4 paragraphs. And then I've used some of the typeface that actually originated from the Sun Hing Printers into the books. And then so at Emily Carr University, I am very fortunate to access the Letterpress studios. So as a technician, I'm able to do that with permission. So this is some parts of the studio, and this is the beautiful type that actually originated from Sun Hing Printers and is now in the drawers in the Letterpress studio at Emily Carr. And it's called Murray Hill. And then it's just so beautiful. I had to incorporate it. So it's in the title. So if you see this part, it's the header. But I end up, because there's so many little letters involved in the paragraph, that I had to use Futura, which is a sans serif, and that is at Emily Carr. But I found that after composing 2 paragraphs, I would run out of letters, and I had to take it apart and then make 2 more paragraphs, because it became very laborious. But you know what? At the same time, I really, really enjoy typesetting. It's a very Zen thing. You have to be very patient. It really does take a lot of patience and practice. So there it is again. That's just 1 paragraph. And this is the press that I used at Emily Carr, and it's a Vandercook SP15. I also chose to print on a very less precious paper, just thinking about Sun Hing Printers, and that they used to mainly order paper through Coast Paper, which is a local paper supplier. So it's no longer called Coast, but they're called Spicers now. So I ordered paper from Spicers is a quite nice paper, laid paper called Mohawk Superfine. So Mr. Vandercook, this is me printing very quickly, and it becomes very repetitive once you get everything going. And when printing goes very well, it looks like this. But after I printed those 4 pages and paragraphs, I realized, ooh, I kind of hit a wall, basically, because I don't claim to be a designer. I'm not very good with computers, let's say. So yes, I had this imagery, but how was I going to incorporate it into the book? I really still did not know. So I asked my coworker, Michelle, who's a designer, and it's like, can you teach me some Adobe Illustrator? So we made some patterns. What I did is I proofed some of these blocks and then scanned them, and then we made them into some patterns, which actually worked quite well in the book. But then I was thinking, how I'm going to do this. So I got in touch with Erica Wilk at Monica Press, and I've worked with Erica before on previous book works. So she ended up doing all the risograph printing and pre-press work and bound the book. So lots, this book involved a lot of people, but I think it actually gave it a lot of vibrancy. This is a previous book that I worked with. Erica printed for me and is at Griffin right now as well. So, and this is about Jumbo's cabin, the last structure in Cumberland's Chinatown. I know I just changed topics very quickly, but anyways, actually, so all these pieces started to come together, and I was really pleased with the end result. Like, so much help and so many resources were involved in putting this book together. I just felt like I couldn't even really call it my book. It felt like definitely a collective effort to make this book. So, and then just as I was about to finish making this book, Grunt Gallery approached me and it's like, wow, we're really interested. And they were interested in this book as well. And it's like, can you make more? And I was like, oh! So what happened is I ended up doing a reprinting of it last year. So this is actually some pages, very colorful pages of it, risograph printing, and the translation that Jody did, which is amazing. Like the translations really just like make the book, without it, I can't imagine not having it in the book. And Erica, thankfully, is so great with laying out and printing, and Erica's business Monica Press is also in Chinatown. So you know what? The book pretty much was printed in Chinatown again. So this is the second printing of the book, and this is through, it's a co-publication with the Grunt Gallery. So I felt there was a need to kind of change the cover a little bit, mainly because it was a higher volume, and also we made a couple small updates to the book as this exhibit was last fall, from September to December of last year. And it was a larger edition at 100. So then when Vanessa Kwan of Grunt Gallery said, we want the show to look good, and we want a very specific site-specific piece, and I was like, oh, but like, how? I was like, my brain, I was like, so I really thought about the storefront again of Sun Hing Printers, and with Kay Slater is the exhibitions manager of Grunt Gallery, and Kay basically, I said to Kay, I want to make the storefront. Can we make it a big mural? Kay said yes. And so, oh my goodness, without Kay, this could not be possible. So I basically sketched out a small image of the storefront and to proportion of this wall. So that's how it came about, that the wall and the mural and the book cover. And that kind of brings me to the end. I'm to my slideshow.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Marlene.
No problem.
Oh, actually, Marlene, I think you're still sharing your screen, if you don't mind.
Oh, stop share, sorry.
Oh,
Okay,
perfect. Yeah.
hang on. Oh, geez. There.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so, so much, Marlene, for that wonderful talk, and how great to get a background info on the project and how it came to be and all the different moving parts and collaborations it entailed. Thank you for that presentation.
Thank you.
And so we actually have this program today is actually offered in conjunction with WePress. So we've been very lucky to work for them for today's presentation. And so next I'm going to introduce Linda Hoffman. And Linda is a collective member who was involved in the Housekeeping Notes type rescue project. And so we're really delighted to have Linda joining us today. And it's my pleasure to introduce her. Linda has worked in many disciplines as an editorial assistant on a magazine, Euros, New York City, in the film department of a television station, KPIX San Francisco, as an editorial assistant at the Sierra Club in San Francisco, in the personal department at UNESCO in Paris, France, as a library assistant at Woodward Biomedical Library at the University of British Columbia, as a typesetter for Intermedia Press, and as an arts administrator for Vancouver New Music when she retired in 2014. And Linda completed an apprenticeship in typesetting at Vancouver Community College, which included instruction in setting type for letterpress and printed cards as part of that training on the letterpress. So thanks so much, Linda, and over to you.
Hi, Jess. My background, I just realized, you know, most people have this like kind of neutral background. What I have is my downstairs bedroom because that's where the computer is. And Marlene just reminded me that you stayed here.
Yes. 25 years ago, probably.
Concert with my daughter.
Yeah, I'm friends with your daughter, Nico.
So anyway, this is my very colorful downstairs bedroom. And WePress has had a long journey, actually. 8 years, in 2013, Kathy Shimizu and Michelle Smith went to the Vancouver Art Book Fair and stopped at a table that Lydia Kwa had. And they looked at this collection of cards she'd made called Linguistic Tantrums. Actually, you know, I bought a card. I don't know if you can you see it?
Oh, yeah.
This, I mean, she had a whole collection and she used this type. And they said, what the hell? Where'd you get all this type? I mean, can you imagine? So Lydia is like doing all this on all these cards. And she said, there's this print shop in Chinatown that's going out of business called Sun Hing. And she bought the type there. So Kathy and Michelle went, ah, they're selling everything. Okay, we might be able to get people together to get something from this print shop. So they sent out this email to all kinds of people. I got it because I used to be a typesetter. And also I know Kathy because we're part of the same Tycho group. And so anyway, I ended up, we met this group of about 25 people or so, met at Rhizome Cafe, which was, I have to mention them because they were a major community place in Vancouver at the time. So this was like in 2014. And we all kind of gathered around this big table and talked about what could we, everybody was interested, but what could we afford? Well, obviously we couldn't, and they had checked things out. They checked out how much presses would cost and type would cost and this and that. And we obviously could not afford to buy a press, but we could probably afford to buy a complete set of Chinese type, and so we raised $250, got this set of 8,000 metal characters of Chinese type, which we had this big work party that went in and wrapped all the type in shrink wrap and then carried it down the street to store in the basement of a friend's studio. It was like major effort on the part of everybody. And then there it was, this, I don't know how many pounds of metal type sitting in the basement of a studio in Chinatown. Then we had to do something. We had to figure out, okay, what are we going to do with this type? And Michael Clegg, who was part of the Community Arts Council of Vancouver at the time, said, well, you know, the Community Arts Council has inherited Woodward's old letterpress and a bunch of their type, mostly gigantic type, because it was, you know, for flyers and stuff. And maybe we would be interested in buying it. And we said, yes, we would be. So then we had to find somewhere to put this press. And he said, you can have it and you can pay us later when you have the money. And we said, yes, good. Now we have to figure out, where do we put the press? And at this time, the group of 25 had dwindled to a smaller group, way smaller. So it was Kathy and Michelle and Candy Tanaka, Fran Hang, Michael Clegg, and me. And I'm not sure why me. I don't know why I got sucked into this, but then there's Kathy. And Kathy can pretty much persuade anybody to do anything. So there I was in this group of artists. I'm not an artist. I was a typesetter, but I'm not an artist. But anyway, there I was. And Luca, who is still with us, knew Fran, and she has a degree in printmaking from the University of Alberta. So she knows everything. She knows everything. And so she decided, he invited her to the meeting, and she joined us and trying to figure out, okay, what the hell are we going to be doing with this press until we get money so we can have a space. And she was working at Gallery Gachet at the time, which is a gallery, an art space, a collective, as we were, that had exhibits of their members, and they offered to store the press in their space until we had room for it somewhere else. That was actually, took us a long time. But we did eventually get a grant from the Vancouver Foundation, thanks to Candy and Luca and Michael and everybody who helped write that grant. And we moved into a space in the Sun Hing Center, which is where Marlene showed us pictures of. It was very small. It was very narrow and had a little room in the back. But it was big enough to run workshops, and it fit the press. So we moved the press from Gachet into Sun Hing, and we opened in 2016. Meantime, Kathy and I had been talking about WePress in the Tycho group and whatever. And one of the members, Helen Kang, heard us talking about it and thought it sounded kind of interesting. And so she came to the open house, talked to other members of the collective, and joined us. So now we were bigger. Then the collective has kind of, people have come and gone, and we are now 6 people: Kathy, Luca, Helen, me, Allie, and Nina, who, and Nina Ali is also a printmaker, knows all about printing, and is an artist. And Nina totally knows systems. And she has really helped immensely setting us up with a database and with this and that, and she's been fantastic. Also, we had also purchased with our Vancouver Foundation money a 3D printer. And Nina could run that 3D printer, and so yay. So we had all of these skills. I'm probably the least skilled, but you know, I'm here and I can do things, just can't do anything really skillful. But we decided to be a collective. And in order to write grants, we had to have a mission statement, which I am now going to read because I can't just give it to you. But it does tell you about WePress. The mission of WePress is to advance education by providing workshops on historic letterpress and contemporary 3D printer, methods of print and art making for the public, with a particular focus on individuals from marginalized communities in Vancouver's downtown Eastside. So we are, at this point, we were in Chinatown at the Sun Center, which is really part of what's considered the downtown Eastside, although Chinatown and the downtown Eastside have two different characteristics. But we are now in the serious downtown Eastside on East Hastings Street, sharing space with Gallery Gachet. And it's important to us to be there, to be in that area, and to make it easy for people from the downtown Eastside and from Chinatown to come to our workshops. They can walk to our workshops and feel comfortable, feel like it's a space that is welcoming to them and accessible to them. And so that is really a serious part of our mandate. What else? Let's see. We have been helped by lots of organizations. The Community Art Center, thank you. Powell Street Festival, who kind of sponsored events for us, sponsored grants because they were a nonprofit before we became a nonprofit. We did become a nonprofit in September 2016 with the support of Powell Street Festival and much guidance from Michael. We are also now charitable with the federal government, so we can give receipts to anybody who'd like to donate to us, and we can always use money. And in the beginning of 2017, the Community Arts Council sold us the press for $1. Yay! So we became the proud owners of a press and a lot of gigantic type. So we have had to buy type that was a bit smaller in order to do a lot of printing. Let's see, what else do I know? Okay, the WePress has sponsored a lot of projects. The Neighborhood Sketchbook Project, which was really, really wonderful. We had 40 people from 10 different organizations on the downtown Eastside and Chinatown. And they sent us four people from their groups who came and created sketchbooks. They made the books, they bound the books, and then they learned these different skills to put into the books. There was painting and calligraphy and letterpress, of course, and crazy quilting, just all kinds of things. And they created these sketchbooks, which then was Gallery Gachet had an exhibit of them so that people could show their friends and family what they've been doing with us. And another project is the Chinatown Seniors Project, where people came and did workshops, also art making workshops. But during these workshops, they talked about different topics, where they came from, their family, their friends, the neighborhood, their community, different things. And they shared their stories, which we recorded. And I should say that Yarrow has been really helpful, again, with us, because we've had to provide both Mandarin and Cantonese translations for all of these workshops. And they've been great supplying these translators. Anyway, so the final project for the Chinatown Seniors Project is a book, which will incorporate their artwork and their stories translated into English. I'm not sure, I'm not sure if they're going to be in Chinese and in English or what. I can't, they're still working on the book. And they're gonna have to get more funding for that book. Probably not Chinese, because I don't think we can afford to print that many books. Anyway, moving on. That is so ongoing. And the current project is the Indigenous Artists Project, where we have commissioned artists to create pieces, and we will see, some have finished their project, some are still doing it, and we're not quite sure what the final presentation will be. But that is still an ongoing project for WePress. And before the pandemic, we ran all kinds of workshops, bookmaking, crazy quilting regularly, just different letterpress, different workshops, using artists, mainly from the community, because we're trying to pay people to do things for us. We don't want too much volunteer labor. We want to help in a concrete fashion, besides teaching art. So what else? We also had a regular open studio session, and people would just drop in. And it was somewhere they could come, and I think for a lot of the people, we provide the materials, so they don't have to buy things. They come, there's paper, there's paint, there's chalk, there's blocks and there's carving tools. So they can just come and make art, and they don't have to worry about spending money to make that art. So in the past year, we've kind of switched our focus from art making to food production. So we are now running a kitchen out of the Vancouver Japanese Language School. 5 days a week, we make lunch, and we distribute it to various organizations around the neighborhood. So that's really, and because we've been so committed to the downtown East Side, even though we have moved from art making to food production, we're still managing to get funded because it's where we're based, and it's where our hearts lie and our commitment lies. And what else? I think that might be it. And actually, we don't we don't own that Corex printing press. It's okay. It's been lent to us by Kristen Louie. And because we're storing it for her, she says we could use it, the community can use it. And I think it's better than the Woodward's press. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Linda. Thanks again for joining us. And wow, so inspiring to hear the story behind WePress and everything that was involved into getting your collective where it is today and the amazing work you're doing. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I'm really excited for this next part of the program where you'll actually get a sneak peek into the WePress studio. So Marlene worked with Luca from WePress to record a really wonderful demo, which gives an up-close look at the letterpress process. So I'm going to share that now, which is about just under 14 minutes long, and then we'll open it up to audio questions or audience questions. So here we go.
My name is Marlene Yuen, and I am a local Vancouver-based artist, printmaker, and my most recent piece is about Sun Hing Printers, which was a print shop that existed in Vancouver's Chinatown for over 100 years. And we are in WePress today.
Yes, my
name
is Retell, and I'm a collective member of WePress. So I operate and program and fundraise for this space with a collective of 500 people. And we are invested in the history of the whole Sun Hing Letterpress shop because some of our earliest collective members were involved with rescuing type and blocks from the letterpress shop when it was shutting down.
Thank you so much. Like, we're going to get today, Luca and I will be showing you how to print a paragraph from a page of my book. So we will be working on this Corex press together. It is a German press. Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah, sure. This press is actually on loan to us, but it's sort of like a semi-permanent loan, like it will stay here as long as possible. And when WePress started, we started just with the Reynolds press, which is to my left here. And that's like a proofing press for producing signs. So I've heard it described as a workhorse. It's like the perfect kind of like little press for, well, it's not really little, but like easy to use press for community arts. However, this one is kind of like top of the line. So we're so lucky to have it here. And it's a Corex press, as Marlene said. It's a German press, but it's basically the German version of a Vandercook. Vandercooks are a lot more well known in the print community, but it operates almost identical to a Vandercook.
What we have here today is hand-set lead type, and this is a paragraph that is actually in my book, Whose Printers. So I will point out a few things. The very ornate, curly type, that is the title that says a family business, comes from Whose Printers. And as they were closing out shop, it was sold. And my friend bought this type, and it's actually, we looked it up. There's a book about various typefaces, and it's called Murray Hill. It's quite a beautiful typeface. So I decided to use it to describe the Lam family's business. And what we see here in the smaller type is Futura, and it's a very classic sans type, and I needed something more that I could compose with, so this smaller type here actually belongs to Emily Carr University. So I thought this was a good mixture of incorporating into the book. So every letter and space is its each little piece. So I will show you with tweezers. These are very, very fragile as they're very old. So if you can see, you can pull, if I pull that W out, that is one piece. And then even the spaces in between are one piece. So like, we try not to sneeze when composing type. Or, yeah, anything, just being really careful. So all this pieces of wood that we see surrounding the paragraph is called furniture, and it's spacing basically, and we try to build it up. I almost explain it to students as, it's kind of like Tetris. We're gonna build it together and make this as tight as possible, but not so tight that it starts to pop up. So here I am surrounding the lead type with furniture. And this is a lockup bar that will keep it in place. Well, before that, I always forget this little step. It does help sometimes tapping it down, because sometimes one letter may be a little bit higher, so the planer helps. Some people don't bother with that step, but makes me feel a little bit better. Okay, so now we see the type is locked into place onto the bed of the Corex. How I normally add ink to the main roller is I do it across this, maybe some crummy bits. Everyone has their own way. Some people do this, right? I don't know. We can do both. We can do both. And then brings it up and down. When you want it down, the roller's down right now, right?
Yeah.
This seems like there may not be enough ink. But you can, if we have smell-o-vision, you can smell how good this ink smells. We want all the rollers to have enough ink to be fully black, but this ink is taking a little bit of time to warm up because this part has. So there's these little guides here, and they kind of just, you have to slide them in place to get them to catch onto the paper. So basically, if you're running, let's say 50 prints, you're always gonna have them under the right spot. When you release the pedal, then it holds the paper in place, and then usually I wind it forward. Hold on. Hey, it's a bit light. So I can either pad it or use a thicker paper or add more ink. So there's quite a few variations. So as I pull it forward, it goes back to trip. And then once I roll it back, it shouldn't ink the type anymore. So that's always a good first try. A good basic printmaking paper that one could use is Stonehenge. And it's definitely more like on the economical side, but I would recommend if like someone was learning to print, for, why would you spend a lot of money on, you could, ultimately you could buy something more high-end like BFK, which is lovely, but for today's demonstration purposes, we will use Stonehenge. Because it has nice results. And actually for my book, I end up just using Mohawk paper, super fine, which is a printer paper. You can buy at Spicer's, which is a local paper, like there's a cash and carry in Richmond, and before they were called Spicers, they were actually called Coast Paper, and that was where like Sun Hing Printers bought a lot of the papers from. So
Wow, that's interesting.
yeah, so there's a lot of like little tie-ins. I was trying to like the paper that I used and the type that I used, and so just making it more. So it's still quite light here, but you know, maybe these think the ink could be more distributed, or we could pad this. Yeah, you can tell there's actually a big difference now. It looks more distributed. I'm gonna add a little bit more ink. Another thing that affects how things print is weight of the paper. So this one is 250 GSM, which is a heavier weight. So as we can see, still a few printing issues. And it's made quite a big impression.
It's almost darker in
The middle, right? There's like a streak. Well, you know, we're gonna try a different type of paper, cardstock. Buying cardstock's usually around 80 pound weight sometimes, depending. There's heavier weight. This might be. Hey, looking good!
oh my god.
I love this, and it really reminds me of the color of Sun Hing Printers, because back in the heyday it was this painted this green, very popular green, which is often used in like a lot of businesses, like restaurants and establishments. When I first went to the print shop, Sun Hing Printers, when I was closing down, it was also because Kathy had told me about it, and also because at work we were informed that Sun Hing Printers was closing, and because Emily Carr has a Letterpress studio, we're hoping to acquire some spacing, some type, and you know, so getting in touch with like trying to put all these like elements together was really like, important to the book. Just like, so that was like, I've known Kathy, you know, who basically was wanting to rescue the type, but you know, it's great. I mean, I'm glad WePress is here to save the type and have a home for it, where I believe like a lot of seniors are able to read it and one day hopefully make a book or project with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason we want to find a bigger space, is so that we can have all of the Chinese type here.
It's amazing.
So we have had seniors like work with the blocks from Sun Hing, but we haven't been able to work with as much of the type, the individual pieces here.
It's looking quite good. It's printing quite well. I love this green, I have to say. And the Murray Hill, the first family business, which is about Sun Hing Printers, you know, was a business that ran for over 100 years in Chinatown. And so now we're move on to cleaning, which is really important for the maintenance of these presses, as they are very old and we want to keep them well maintained. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, there's rollers to clean. First thing I normally do is when the type is still locked, I clean it because it's much easier to clean a locked type as loose. Once you pull off the bed of the press, it's more challenging to clean it very well. So usually with a rag,
the rags are bad.
I would We're using mineral spirits today to clean. Anyways, those little fire safe bottles are really handy to have. But right here, like I just saturate it in the rag with some spirits, and in a ventilated space, yeah, cleaning is very important. I mean, to do a good thorough job on all these rollers is essential to maintaining a press.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of the demo, which was just so amazing to see that up close footage and learn a little bit more about the letterpress process. So a huge thanks to WePress and Marlene and Luca for putting that demo together for us to share today. So I know we're going a bit over time today, but I do want to make sure we get our audience questions in. And we have a few waiting for us in the Q&A dialog box. So Marlene and Linda, I'm going to jump you back on here for the Q&A. Let's see if you don't mind starting your videos. Perfect. Awesome. Okay, so I am going to be reading the questions, but again, if any audience members would like to ask their questions out loud, I can also unmute you, but I'll perhaps start with just a few we have waiting for us. So our first question is for Marlene. So thanks for sharing your journey, Marlene. Have you heard from the Lam family about your Grunt Gallery show or your book?
No, I have not. After I printed the first printing of the book, I got in touch with Norman Lam and informed him the book was done. And then I said, I have some copies for you, and I never heard back. So I wasn't sure if he was not interested or like busy. So I just kind of like, I sent him another email after that, and then I haven't heard back. So no, I have not.
All right, okay, thanks, Marlene. So our next question, also for Marlene, can you speak about the concept of community and how it manifests in the Chinatown context as represented in the 100-year-old business of Ho Sun Hing and also within your making of your book?
I would say community was like in the past or in the mainly the making of the book. Well, it definitely involved me getting in touch with various organizations, such as like WePress, and also in turn, it would get me in touch with Jody of Yarrow, and they're very important organizations that provide programming for the community in Chinatown and also for seniors. So I would say that is about back in the making of the book, but I said also there's like, in terms of community for Chinatown, I remember when I was talking to Norman Lam that like a lot of, when Chinatown was a very, very busy place, that Sun Hing Printers printed a lot for the restaurants, for the businesses. And actually some of the imagery that I was included were like a lot of the shops had their own catalogs. So a can of water chestnuts was actually a product you can purchase. And they also printed menus and invoices. And so Sun Hing Printers was a very important part of the Chinatown community, but they also printed for beyond Chinatown. They printed for organizations and businesses even outside, like let's say New West and Burnaby. So they definitely like served the community for a very, very long time. But I guess ultimately, as time passes on, like, and computers and people are not willing to pay the price for high quality printed goods. So, and also the aging, as the family, the Lam family aged, there wasn't really this desire to continue the business.
Wonderful. Go ahead, Linda.
I just like to say they also did things like wedding invitations.
Yes.
Personal things that where you wanted something that was special, big birthdays, stuff like that. I think they did a lot of that as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So we have another question here, which is referring, Marlene, to your Grunt Gallery installation. And we have an attendee who wrote, "I love the change in scale from book to wall. What did that mean to you?"
Oh, well, there was a tiny bit of pressure. Like, the Grunt Gallery had been closed for quite some time due to lockdown. And my show was, it was kind of like, well, was this going to go ahead or go, what if things get worse? What if the gallery has to close? No, but Vanessa and Wes, who curated the show, they still wanted the show to go on, even if, let's say, the gallery had to close. Just things were so uncertain in the fall. So Vanessa wanted a very site-specific piece, and it's like, so what I remember Vanessa saying was, I want it big, I want it colorful, and people can be able to see it even if we lock our doors. Like, so if you know the Grunt Gallery, it's very much glass. So I was thinking, what can be big and bold and bright? So I really was like, and I've never, it's not I'm not a mural artist. And so thankfully with a lot of help from Case later we were able to achieve that big mural piece. And it was very bright, we were like, well, let's say if we had to lock down again, then there's something that people can look through the window. And I thought of what I thought was the storefront, because when it was functioning, it was this bright green and vibrant building. And also, if you look at the building now at 259 East Georgia, it's gray, it's not in use. So I wanted to also bring back the life that once existed into this business, but also Chinatown. I think it was also a turning point. When this shop closed, it caused a lot of emotions that, this is Chinatown is being gentrified. Chinatown is what can we save it? And as the pandemic progresses, there are much less businesses open. So just the thought of this community surviving, so I just wanted to show it in bright, big color and what it used to be a thriving business to a very thriving community.
Amazing. Yeah, so wonderful to see that installation. So thank you. So yeah, just a huge thank you to both Marlene and Linda for your thoughtful presentations today. Just so wonderful to hear more about the background of your book projects, Marlene, and the background of WePress and how the organization has grown and thrived in these past years. So thank you as well, Linda, for joining us here today. If you haven't had a chance to visit Griffin Art Projects yet, we're open from noon till 5 p.m. every Saturday, and we do just ask that you book online in advance, but it would be great if you could make it to the gallery in person, where you'll be able to see Marlene's books as part of the exhibition. We do have a number of upcoming online programs. So if you go to our website, www.griffinartprojects.ca, under events, you'll see all our upcoming events. So we have 2 next weekend. We have an open studio with our current artists in residence, Navarana, on the Saturday. And then we have a director's talk with Karen Cho on the Sunday. So we hope to see you there. And this talk as well is recorded and will be posted to our website under our digital archives as well. So be sure to check back there, usually up within about a week. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.